Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I grew up in Bexley, Ohio, which sounds nice until you actually live here. It's this upper class town where everyone thinks they're better than everyone else. Kids get brand new, luxury cars for their 16th birthdays like it's nothing. My neighbor got a BMW just for passing her driving test. That's just normal here. The worst part is how people drive. They treat the roads like their personal racetracks, blowing through stop signs and parking wherever they want. It's like traffic laws don't apply to them because they have money. Unlike most kids here, I actually work for everything I have. I'm 20 years old and pay my own college tuition, car payments, insurance, and even rent to live at home since my parents set an 18-year-old limit. They still cover food and utilities, which I'm grateful for, but everything else is on me. I go to Ohio State and work morning shifts to pay for it all. I get maybe 5 hours of sleep on a good night. About a month ago, I decided to treat myself to sushi after a rough morning shift. There's this place near Capital University that I like. The parking lot was almost full when I got there, but I found one empty space and pulled in. I spent about 30 minutes inside enjoying my lunch. When I came back out, I saw something that made me angry. A massive gray GMC Yukon had parked right behind my car, completely blocking me in. The concrete bumpers in front of each space meant I was totally trapped. I took a picture of the license plate thinking maybe I'd need it later. I figured the owner would be back soon. Maybe the lot was full when they arrived and they had to park somewhere. It happens. So I got in my car and waited, listening to music quietly. 10 minutes later, this woman showed up. She looked around 35 and was upset about something. She knocked on my window and told me to turn my music down. Then she started going off about how college kids were ruining her city. She yelled at me to wake up and called me a spoiled brat. I stared at her, confused. My music wasn't even that loud, and I had no idea why she was yelling at me. I also go to Ohio State, not Capital, but she seemed to have made up her mind about who I was. I turned off my music and rolled up my window, hoping she'd just leave me alone. That's when she pulled out keys and got into the GMC Yukon that was blocking me in. She was the one who had trapped me there. She screeched out of the parking lot, spraying mud all over my car in the process. My car that I worked 2 jobs to pay for and maintain. And she called me the spoiled brat. Because of her little tantrum, I was 15 minutes late getting back to work. I'm never late. This was the first time in months, and my manager wasn't happy about it. I swore that if I ever saw that woman again, I'd give her a taste of her own medicine. Fast forward a month. I had just finished a brutal exam and decided to grab sushi from the same place to celebrate being done. When I pulled into the parking lot, I saw something that made me happy. There was the same gray GMC Yukon, and this time it was taking up the last 2 parking spaces in the lot. I was grinning as I parked right next to her driver's side door. I made sure I was completely within my space but left her maybe 5 inches to somehow get into her car. Then I went inside, ordered my sushi to go, and sat in my car to wait. About 15 minutes later, I heard yelling from the parking lot. The same woman had come back to find her car blocked in. She was screaming about suing whoever did this to her. When she saw me sitting in the car next to hers, she walked over. She demanded that I move my car right now. I told her that she got into the spot so she could get out of the spot. She threatened to call the police. I told her to go ahead. She was furious, but she pulled out her phone. I wasn't worried at all. I know parking laws, and I was completely within my space. I even have a thin blue line bumper sticker on my car. A police officer showed up within a minute. The woman started screaming at him about how I had blocked her in illegally. She said I trapped her in on purpose and that I needed to move my car. I told the officer I was just trying to park in the available space. The officer walked around both cars, looking at how they were positioned. He shook his head when he saw how the woman had parked across 2 spaces. He told the woman that she should be happy I didn't have her car towed because she was parked illegally across 2 spaces. He said she had 1 minute to move her vehicle or he would write her a ticket. The woman looked angry. She had to climb through her passenger door because there wasn't enough room on the driver's side. While she was struggling to get in, she started throwing trash out of her car in a fit of rage. The officer knocked on her window when she finally got the car started. He told her to pick up the trash she just threw. She asked him if that wasn't what garbage men do. I lost it. I started laughing so hard I could barely breathe. Her comment was so stupid and entitled that I started laughing. That's when the woman really looked at me for the first time. I could see recognition dawn on her face. She remembered our first encounter, and she was not happy about it. She got out, angrily, picked up her trash, and got back in her car. The officer was getting ready to leave when she jerked her car out of the parking space. She came within inches of hitting his patrol car when she sped toward the parking lot exit. The officer turned on his lights and pulled her over right there in the lot. Since the parking lot was only about 40 feet wide and she stopped maybe 20 feet from me, I could hear everything. She yelled at the officer about getting a ticket for reckless driving. I could tell from her tone that she was getting a ticket for more than just a parking violation. I turned my music back on and sat there soaking in the satisfaction. After everything she put me through, watching her get pulled over for her own bad behavior felt like perfect justice. I pulled out of the parking lot, leaving her there arguing with the officer. I work as a medical equipment technician at the local hospital. My job involves maintaining and repairing the machines that keep patients alive. X-ray machines, monitors, ventilators, you name it. I've been doing this for about 8 years now, and I've seen my fair share of crazy situations. But nothing prepared me for what I witnessed that Tuesday afternoon in the emergency room. I was there to fix a broken blood pressure monitor when this whole mess started. The emergency room was absolutely packed. It was flu season, and we had the usual mix of people waiting for treatment. There were parents holding feverish toddlers, an elderly gentleman clutching his chest, and a construction worker with what looked like a nasty gash on his forehead. The atmosphere was tense, like it always is when people are hurt and scared. I was wheeling my tool cart toward the broken monitor when this woman burst through the entrance doors. She had perfectly styled blonde hair and was wearing what looked like expensive clothes. But what caught my attention was the way she was cradling her left arm like it was about to fall off. The woman walked straight to the reception desk, cutting in front of everyone who had been waiting patiently in line. She demanded to be seen immediately and claimed this was a medical emergency. The receptionist, a sweet lady named Sarah who I've worked with for years, looked up with her usual professional smile and asked what happened. The woman thrust her arm towards Sarah and announced that she had been attacked by her neighbor's cat. From where I was standing, I could see what she was talking about. There were 3 tiny scratches on her forearm. They weren't even bleeding anymore. I've seen worse injuries from opening a can of soup. Sarah told her she understood her concern and explained that she would get her registered so someone could take a look as soon as possible. The woman wasn't having any of it. She asked if Sarah was kidding and insisted she could have rabies and might die. She demanded to be seen right away. I shook my head and went back to working on the monitor. People sometimes panic over minor injuries, but the medical staff here is good at prioritizing cases based on actual severity. That's when the automatic doors opened again, and a young couple rushed in carrying a little boy. The kid was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and even from across the room I could see something was seriously wrong with his left leg. It was bent at an angle that made my stomach turn. The boy was crying quietly, trying to be brave, but you could see the pain written all over his face. His father was supporting most of the boy's weight, while his mother ran ahead to the reception desk. She begged for help and explained that their son had fallen off his bike and broken his leg. The woman with the cat scratches whipped around and saw the family approaching. Instead of stepping aside like any decent human being would do, she planted herself directly in their path. She told them that she was there first and insisted her injury was clearly more serious than whatever was wrong with their kid. I stopped what I was doing and stared. Did she really just say that? The father politely asked her to please let them through because their son was in a lot of pain. The woman refused and said she wouldn't wait any longer. She claimed she had a potentially life-threatening injury and demanded to be treated immediately. The mother was getting desperate now. Her little boy was whimpering, and she could see how much he was hurting. She begged the woman to please just look at him and explain that his leg was broken. The woman said she didn't care and insisted that her injury happened first and was more serious. She kept going on about how she could have rabies. By now, the commotion had caught the attention of the nursing staff. Two nurses came rushing over, Janet, who I'd known for years, and a younger nurse whose name I didn't know. Janet asked what the situation was. The mother explained that their son had a broken leg and needed immediate attention. The woman interrupted and said that she was there first and needed to be seen now. She accused the family of trying to cut in line. Janet took one look at the boy and immediately began assessing his condition. She completely ignored the woman with the scratches, which sent her into an absolute rage. The woman asked if Janet had just ignored her and said she was talking to her. She demanded to speak to a supervisor. The younger nurse gently tried to guide the woman aside while Janet and another nurse who had appeared began preparing to move the boy to a treatment room. The young nurse told the woman that she understood her concern about her injury, but explained that this child needed immediate care. She promised they would get to her as soon as they could. The woman said this was unacceptable and threatened to sue the hospital. She called them all incompetent. She was practically screaming now. The whole waiting room was staring, and I could see people shaking their heads in disgust. But then she did something that crossed every line imaginable. When Janet and the other nurse were trying to get the boy onto a wheelchair, the woman actually grabbed Janet's arm and tried to pull her away. She yelled that they needed to treat her first and said she wasn't waiting another second. That's when this big guy, who had been sitting quietly in the corner with his very pregnant wife, stood up. He was tall, probably 6'3", with broad shoulders and the kind of presence that commands attention. I later found out he was an off-duty police officer. The officer told the woman she needed to step back right now. The woman asked who he thought he was and said he couldn't tell her what to do. The officer identified himself and told her she had just assaulted a medical professional. He ordered her to turn around and put her hands behind her back. The woman's face went completely pale. She asked what he meant and said she didn't assault anyone. She claimed this was ridiculous, but the officer was already moving. In one smooth motion, he spun her around and had her hands behind her back. The sound of handcuffs clicking into place echoed through the suddenly quiet waiting room. The officer announced that she was under arrest for assault and interfering with medical care. The woman said this was insane and insisted he couldn't arrest her. She claimed to be the victim and said she had rights. The officer told her she had the right to remain silent and suggested she use it. He pulled out his phone and called for backup while keeping a firm grip on the woman, who was now alternating between screaming about lawsuits and demanding to speak to someone in charge. With the distraction finally removed, the medical staff was able to focus on the injured boy. They quickly got him into a treatment room where doctors could properly assess his leg. His parents were finally able to breathe, knowing their son was getting the care he needed. The woman continued her tantrum even when two uniformed officers arrived to take her away. She was yelling about discrimination and police brutality, completely oblivious to the fact that she had brought this entirely on herself. The woman shouted that they would all be sorry and threatened to own the hospital when she was done suing. She said her lawyer would destroy all of them. The officer suggested that she might want to worry more about finding a good criminal defense attorney. When they led her out in handcuffs, still screaming threats and demands, the entire waiting room burst into spontaneous applause. The off-duty officer returned to his pregnant wife, who gave him a proud smile and squeezed his hand. I finished repairing the monitor and was packing up my tools when Janet came over to check on the equipment. She told me she couldn't believe that woman and said that in all her years of nursing, she had never seen anything quite like that. I asked how the boy was doing. Janet said he would be fine and explained it was a clean break that should heal perfectly. She mentioned his parents were so relieved. I asked about the woman with the scratches. Janet said she would probably get medical attention in jail and noted that those scratches would heal just fine without any treatment at all. I learned later that the woman was charged with assault, disorderly conduct, and interfering with emergency medical care. The officer's body camera had captured everything, so there was no question about what had happened. She ended up pleading guilty and paying a hefty fine plus community service at a local animal shelter. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The boy made a full recovery and was back on his bike within 2 months. His parents sent a thank you card to the hospital staff and specifically mentioned the off-duty officer who had stepped in to help. I was 19 and had just finished my first year of community college. Money was tight, so I was still living at home and working part-time at the local grocery store to help pay for school. My friend lived on the outskirts of town in one of those areas where the houses get more spread out and the roads turn to gravel. We'd been up late playing video games, and I decided to walk home the next morning instead of calling my mom for a ride. The walk wasn't too bad, maybe 3 miles total. I had my headphones in, listening to music and enjoying the cool morning air. Our town sits in a valley, so there are rolling hills everywhere with deep ditches running alongside most of the roads for drainage. When I turned the corner onto the main road that would take me back into town, I could see a row of old, run-down houses on my right side. Some of them looked abandoned with overgrown yards and broken fences. I was minding my own business when I saw 2 dogs running toward me from the direction of those houses. This wasn't unusual. Dogs in small towns tend to roam around, especially in the morning when they're looking for scraps or attention from anyone walking by. I'd grown up around dogs and never had any problems. One of the dogs, a smaller mixed breed, stopped running when it got closer to me. But the other one, a boxer with a solid build and intense eyes, kept charging straight at me. Before I could even react or take my headphones out, the dog lunged at my ankle and bit down hard. The pain was immediate and intense. I screamed and tried to pull away, but the dog's grip was like a vice. It started dragging me toward the ditch on the left side of the road. I lost my balance and fell backward, landing hard on the rocky slope of the drainage ditch. When I looked up from the bottom of the ditch, I saw the boxer jumping toward my face. Pure instinct kicked in, and I kicked out hard, catching the dog square in the snout. It backed off for a second, giving me just enough time to scramble to my feet. That's when I heard a car horn honking repeatedly. I looked up and saw a vehicle stopped on the road with people inside gesturing frantically for me to get in. I started climbing out of the ditch, but the dog came at me again, biting my leg a second time. I kicked it off and kept moving toward the car. The boxer jumped up at me one more time when I reached the road, and I had to use my arm to block its attack. By now, one of my legs was bleeding heavily from the bite wounds, and my arm was scratched up and bleeding from where I'd blocked the dog's final lunge. I yanked open the car door and basically collapsed into the back seat, landing across the laps of 2 middle-aged women. I was apologizing profusely while asking them to please take me to the hospital. I was a mess, bleeding all over their car and probably in shock. One of the women said my name, which caught me off guard. She explained that we'd been classmates in high school. I felt terrible that I didn't recognize her immediately, but I was pretty shaken up. She told me they were coming back from a family gathering and mentioned something about their congregation. It dawned on me that I'd just been rescued by a car full of Jehovah's Witnesses. The driver, an older man, said he wanted to drive slowly past the area where the attack happened to see if we could spot where the dog had come from. When we approached the row of houses, we all watched the boxer run straight up to one particular house. A woman came outside, looked around cautiously like she was checking to see if anyone was watching, then quickly let the dog inside and shut the door. I was furious. This woman had clearly seen what happened and was trying to hide her dog instead of checking if I was okay or taking responsibility. I called my mom from the car to let her know I was heading to the hospital. She laughed at first, thinking I was joking around, but when she realized I was serious, her tone changed completely. When we got to the hospital, I apologized again for getting blood on their car seats. The Jehovah's Witnesses were incredibly kind about the whole thing and even waited to make sure I got inside okay. A nurse brought out a wheelchair, and I was taken straight to a treatment room. The medical staff was efficient but thorough. I had a nurse working on cleaning and bandaging my arm while a doctor examined my leg. The bite wound on my leg wasn't deep enough to require stitches, but the doctor explained that the dog's tooth had moved around in the wound when I was trying to get free, which made it more jagged and harder to clean. They used about 10 of those iodine-soaked cotton swabs to clean out all the debris and bacteria from the bite marks. Then they had to clean the other side of my leg where the dog had bitten me the second time. The whole process was painful, but they gave me some strong pain medication that helped take the edge off. My mom arrived just when they were finishing up the bandaging. She saw all the bloody gauze and medical supplies around me and immediately freaked out. She called the police right there from the hospital room. After I was all cleaned up and the pain meds had kicked in, a police officer came to take my statement. He photographed my injuries for evidence and had me walk him through exactly what had happened. When I finished telling him about seeing the woman let the dog back into her house, he suggested we drive over there to investigate. We pulled up to the rundown house and the officer knocked on the front door. A woman in her 50s or 60s answered, looking nervous. The officer explained that he had someone with him who claimed to be attacked by a dog from this house and asked her about any dog she owned. The woman insisted that was impossible because her dog Hannibal was old and only had a couple teeth left, so there was no way he could hurt anyone. I was amazed she'd actually named her dog Hannibal, but that was the least of my concerns at that moment. When Hannibal appeared in the doorway and immediately started barking and snapping in my direction, the woman quickly grabbed him and pulled him back inside. The officer said he'd seen enough. The woman nervously asked if I was pressing charges against her, and he told her that hadn't been determined yet. I went home that night and thought long and hard about what I wanted to do. My medical bills were going to be expensive, and I was going to miss work while my leg healed. After talking it over with my mom, I decided I wanted the woman to cover my hospital costs and maybe a little extra for the pain and trauma. The total came out to about $2,000, with the hospital bill being around $1,250. My mom had a friend who was a lawyer and she said I could sue for up to $5,000 if I wanted to. I decided that seemed excessive and told them I just wanted my actual costs covered. The officer also asked if I wanted the dog put down. I have a dog of my own and I love animals. Despite what Hannibal had done to me, I had a hard time thinking about having someone's pet euthanized. I figured the dog wasn't necessarily evil, just poorly trained or maybe protective of its territory. I declined that option. About a month later, I got word that the woman wanted to fight the charges in court. I was stunned. This seemed like the most straightforward case imaginable. I had eyewitnesses, medical documentation, photographs of my injuries, and a police officer who had seen her dog react aggressively toward me on site. What could she possibly argue? On the day we were supposed to appear in court, the woman approached me in the hallway outside the courtroom. She wasn't supposed to talk to me directly, but she did anyway. She told me she was broke and apologized for what happened, but said she had to fight it because she just didn't have the money. I actually felt bad for her. She seemed like she might be struggling financially, and I started to wonder if I was being too harsh. Maybe I should just drop the charges and move on. We went into the courtroom, and I told my side of the story. The witnesses who had picked me up also testified about what they'd seen. The whole time I kept thinking about this woman potentially losing everything over a dog bite. The judge said the police officer would present his findings the next day, and court was adjourned. I barely slept that night, feeling guilty about potentially ruining this woman's life over money. The next morning, the same police officer who had taken my statement showed up at my house and asked if he could talk to me. We sat outside on my front porch, and I told him I was thinking about dropping most of the charges because I felt sorry for the woman. The officer told me to hold on and not make any decisions yet because he had done more investigating and I needed to see what he found. He pulled out a folder with photographs of the woman's backyard. What I saw made my stomach turn. There were 6 dogs, all boxers, crammed into a tiny fenced area behind her house. The space was way too small for even one large dog, let alone 6. The officer explained that it got worse because she didn't actually own these dogs. She was keeping them for some wealthy guy in New York City who bred and sold them. She wasn't telling buyers that the dogs had been cooped up and were aggressive from lack of proper socialization. I immediately thought about dogfighting rings and other horrible possibilities. I looked up the price of purebred boxers online and found they could sell for anywhere from $500 to $3,000 each. This woman had 6 of them, which meant she was dealing with potentially $18,000 worth of dogs. There was no way she was broke. The officer explained that he'd been watching the house for 3 days and never saw her let the dogs out of that cramped backyard even once. She barely fed them and basically ignored them completely. Hannibal had apparently gotten through a weak spot in the fence, which is how he'd ended up attacking me. I was furious. This wasn't just about my dog bite anymore. This was about animal abuse and neglect. The next day in court, the judge asked me about dropping the charges. The judge reminded me that yesterday I had been considering dropping or reducing the charges and asked if that was still my intention. I told him yes, that had been my intention until this morning, when I learned about serious animal neglect and abuse happening at the defendant's property. The woman's expression immediately changed from relief to shock, then anger. She looked at me like I had betrayed her. The police officer presented his evidence to the judge, including the photographs of the overcrowded backyard and his observations about the lack of care the dogs were receiving. He explained that Hannibal had escaped through a damaged section of fence and that all 6 dogs showed signs of poor socialization and aggressive behavior from being confined in inadequate conditions. The judge was clearly an animal lover because his demeanor changed completely when he saw the evidence. He was visibly angry at the woman's treatment of the dogs. In the end, I was awarded my full hospital bills plus an additional $3,000 in damages. The woman lost all 6 dogs, who were taken to the animal shelter. Unfortunately, I heard later that a couple of them had to be euthanized because they were too aggressive to be safely rehomed. The man in New York City was investigated, but I think he had enough money and connections to make his problems disappear without facing any real outcomes. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.